Well, joining me now to talk about some of the issues is Patrick Parkinson. He's the Managing Director of the Promontory Financial Group. Thanks very much for coming in today. You're a former Fed banker. You told me you spent 31 years at the Fed, so it's quite interesting for you, I suppose, looking at all the regulation, the wave upon wave that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of this came out of the G20 meeting in Pittsburgh. Are these things that they raise, these regulations that they're trying to put into place, are they still relevant, or are they things that they perhaps missed?
Well, I think they are still relevant. I mean, sort of the central elements, at least in my mind, were stronger regulation of the systemically important banks and other non-bank financial institutions that lie at the heart of the financial system and whose financial difficulties were an important cause of the Great Recession. And then also preparing for them, putting the authorities in a place where one of those institutions gets in trouble, we will have choices other than the two choices we had during the crisis, which were bailout and disorderly failure. And that's the whole purpose of the new resolution regimes that where important progress, I think, is being made or has already been made in the United States in terms of giving adequately statutory tools to the regulators. But they have a lot of work to do to be ensured that they can, when the crisis comes, they can in fact use them effectively. And then finally, very relevant to I think this conference and the question of market regulation, the efforts to strengthen the market infrastructure for over-the-counter derivatives. All that I think is still relevant, still important, still much work to be done. I think areas that perhaps were missed, I know in the United States, I think the term people tend to use is the shadow banking system. I just read in the papers this morning that the Germans who will be chairing the G20 are going to be focusing attention on the shadow banking sector. I've never liked that term very much. It's not clear to me, for example, in the US, people are probably still most worried about money market mutual funds. They're hardly in the shadows. In some sense, they're more transparent than virtually other financial institution. You can get their prospectus and know every last asset that they're holding. Yet clearly, they were an important part of the crisis in the United States. There was a run on money market mutual funds after one of them was foolish enough to be holding a large amount of Lehman commercial paper. And that run, I think, created some of the most dangerous moments in the entire crisis in terms of causing the entire money markets to freeze up, required in the United States in particular the introduction of an ad hoc insurance scheme for them and numerous Federal Reserve liquidity facilities that I had some hand in devising. So I think many feel that there's a need for further regulation and particular regulations that effectively will reduce this risk of a run. But it hasn't happened yet. There are deep divisions of opinion within the regulatory agencies in the United States about this.
So you spend a lot of time advising CEOs and definitely people within the senior executive management team of some of the big banks across the world. What is everybody really worried about? What are they bringing you in to tell them about and to advise them about?
Well, any number of things. I think one of their concerns simply is the very aggressive timetables for implementing much of this, whether that's OTC derivatives regulation, where both the US Congress and then the G20, I think G20 said it should all be in place by the end of 2012. Well, that's not going to happen. I think quite sensibly regulators have let that timetable slip some. But still, even with the lengthened period, it is still quite aggressive and really poses challenges for the institutions in meeting it. Likewise, the whole superstructure of Basel banking regulation, the capital regulations, the new liquidity regulations, there is an expanded timetable for implementation, but the banks still are worried that it's not long enough and that there's much to do to meet those regulatory requirements.